Welcome to Season 3 of Voices of the Goddess podcast, where we empower, inspire, and uplift women to be the goddesses they truly are. I'm your co-host, Julietta, the magical PT, owner and founder of Body and Soul PT, as well as Soul Candy, intuitive, handmade, and one-of-a-kind jewelry and artwork. I support people in finding the magic within themselves, creating balance in their body and soul.
And I'm your other co-host, Graciela, published, award-winning, and professionally certified portrait photographer specializing in boudoir and personal branding. I create portraits of who you are and not just what you look like so that you can become who you've always been. Join us each week as we sit down for a heart-to-heart chat, sharing stories and insights with listeners across the globe. Laughter and tears alike abound as we access ancient wisdom in modern times through unique and exciting storytelling, supporting you on your life's journey. Welcome to the circle and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. We're excited you're joining us today.
Hello,
hey, Graciela. How you holding up?
Girl, whoo. We're doing good. We're doing good. You know, like life comes at you fast.
I'm like, are you changing your mind at all about being my new co-host?
Oh my God, no way. Are you kidding? My co-host is thrilled that I don't have to call them and they don't have to listen to me chat anymore because I get to spend hours on here with you all.
It's wonderful.
How's work been for you?
Work's been good. You know, a lot of this pregame, I call this the pregame warm-up here, the chit-chat between Graciela and Julietta. It comes from stories of people that come and lay on my table. And last week, or maybe it was the week before, I don't know, time's not real anyway. So one of my male clients, like as we finish our session, he's on his phone and I see like something's up and he goes, my uncle just died. And, you know, it brought this whole conversation because he wouldn't cry. He would not cry in front of me.
Sure.
I tried to explain to him that, you know, because he's a real macho man, military, all that. Men don't cry. And because it's not brave, it's not strong. But to me, if a man cries in front of me, I feel honored that they felt safe enough to be vulnerable in front of me. I'm like, to me, it's one of the most brave things that a man can do is to cry.
Absolutely.
Am I wrong?
No, absolutely. You're totally talking my language. You know, I think a lot of people, if you ask them like significant memories and things like that, everyone always says, oh, I remember the day my dad cried, you know, oh, I remember the day my cousin cried, you know, so like, you know, me, I cry at least a couple times a day, every day, like just, you know, just for good measure. But yes, you're right. Like the masculine crying is like such a big deal. And I don't know why, because to me, it is such a glorious thing. Did you see the other day, it was Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, the two like top tennis players. They were doing a doubles match. And after the match, there was like this big like tribute, you know, to Federer and whatnot. And there was somebody singing and he got so overwhelmed at the gravity of the moment, right? Like he was in such gratitude that, oh my God, I get to do this. The guy starts bawling and like not pretty crying, like ugly crying. Like he was just overcome with such emotion. And he reaches over to his buddy Nadal and he grabs him by the hand. Like, here's two major things happening, right? Like this made the news. I mean, if that doesn't tell you about society, right? Like, this guy
and crying makes the news.
Right. And this guy's crying, you know, and these two men who are like the epitome of testosterone, you know, like athletes. And and it's such the sweetest moment. Like, I don't know why the mommy in me now see now I might cry, but you know, the mommy and me just looked at them and I thought, oh my God, at the end of the day, like we're just people, you know, like men are just people, you know, they're right. Like
and I hope that like them capturing that on television for the whole world to see. I'm hoping that sends out the message to men that it's okay to cry. And like it feels good when you cry because it shows that you're human, that you have compassion, that you have a heart. Because, you know, too much, it's like men are soldiers and men are workers and men are robots. And so to see that true emotion come out just It feels good.
And honestly, it truly, for me, crying is an involuntary act. Like, I never say to myself, I'm going to go to that event and get on stage and pick up a microphone and immediately start crying. Like, I really don't do that. When I plan stuff in my head, I'm really like at my best, right? But you're overcome with emotion. So I'm curious, like, how do men feel when that involuntary action comes up? Like, it's got to be physically painful to like bury that back down, right? Like, that's really interesting. In my house, we have 4 kids total, 2 kids left in the house. And, I have boy, girl twins. And my son is a sensitive human being. And my partner and I, we've always allowed him to feel all of his emotions. Same thing with my daughter, like, what you feel is important. Checking in with your body is important. And if something moves you to tears, how lucky are you? Edgar Allan Poe, I quote this all the time. He says, true beauty moves you to tears. Sometimes you cry because you're sad. And man, sometimes you cry because it's so good, right? I think that's what happened between Federer and Nadal. They just had such a moment. The beauty of it just doesn't fit inside your body anymore. It's got to come out from somewhere, right?
Absolutely.
Girl, I could talk about this all day long.
So, and interesting that we were talking about this because today we have one of those things that doesn't happen a lot on Voices of the Goddess. But we have a man on the show as our guest today.
How exciting.
So let's bring him on.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm just blessed.
Michael DeSanti. So exciting.
Thank you. It's great to spend time with you both.
So will you please take a moment and introduce yourself to our audience, tell them who you are and what you do?
I'd actually love to keep listening to your conversation. I think that was a great conversation. I forgot I was even part of the show.
Michael, that can be arranged. We do happy hours here. You can come listen to us all the time.
That was really great. Wow. Keep going. Okay, for brevity, I'm Michael DeSanti. I'm a men's life coach. I work with growth-minded men to overcome limiting beliefs so that they can live lives of fulfillment and passion and purpose. And I do one-on-one coaching. I'm an author. I also run an online group called Find Your Tribe for men, and also a mastermind of that called the Inner Council. And then I also host epic retreats for growth-minded men and women. That's the brevity of what I do.
That sounds like a long to-do list. I know how many spreadsheets that life takes, Michael.
It does. It takes quite a few. It actually, for me, it takes an effective team. I live as well as I can to outsource anything but genius. So the things that don't require me, I let go of that control. So I have amazing teams that help me keep that life together. My wife, one of them.
Of course. I think we just hit our first nugget tweetable right there. I mean, outsource anything but genius. My God. This stuff just rolls off you, Michael. This is amazing.
I think people, I get all the time, especially with a lot of the men that I coach, about how people are so overwhelmed. And I can guarantee there's things on your plate that you're doing that you probably should not be doing, or that you could automate or delegate or eliminate. Yeah. And so if I have to be in control of everything, I'm just going to just overstuff my plate. And there's people that I know can do a lot of things better than I can. So I'm not going to try and overcompensate. I'm going to let them do it. And this way it keeps me focused and present on, why I'm here and what I'm up to.
Very powerful.
Thank you.
Julietta, do you want to start with the first question, or shall I?
When I thought about this, we switched things, but then I'm like, should we switch them back?
I never remember. So you're talking
this episode. I'm going to take over, and I'm taking over, and we're switching back because we're going to do the book question first. Okay. But I don't know actually if this is your book, Michael, but this is our book. Even though your book is for men, it's for everybody. I read the book, and the beginning of the book, you have a page called A Gift. And I've read it out loud. I've read it to myself. I've read it out loud numerous times. I cannot get through it without crying, because we were talking about crying when we start the show. And I think it's just such a powerful message that I know so many women out there that for traumas that they've been through, bad relationships that they've been through, have hatred towards men, anger towards men. And like, we need to get past that to heal. And I think this message that you wrote can be so powerful in starting that healing process.
Yeah.
And so what I really want is for you to read a gift to our audience.
Quest accepted.
Yes.
So my book is called New Man Emerging. And yes, it is written for men, but I agree with you. I think it's the audience is anyone who's growth-minded, man or woman. And so the dedication is ultimately called a gift. So a gift. This book is dedicated to my soul's equal counterpart, the divine feminine. For centuries, you have called for peace, screamed from the treetops that a life of beauty is possible, and have patiently waited for boys to put down their foolish games that have caused the world heartache and despair. For far too long have you wept at night, praying for another way, as we men ignored your plea and went on fighting, comparing, and competing, only to never be satisfied. In our immaturity, we have caused suffering and pain by simply refusing your deeper wisdom and patience, and foolishly mistook your vulnerability for weakness. I am as guilty as the rest, and my mistakes and blind spots are far too many to count. I ask for your love and forgiveness as the masculine awakens. This book is dedicated to you. It is my promise that in our mistakes, there were seeds of wisdom planted that are now emerging. This book is my contract with you, that I am putting down my sword and walking off the battlefield completely. I do this not from a defeat of spirit, but quite the contrary, but rather with a clarity of purpose and vision that is fueled by your beauty and love, a commitment to healing the wounds that we have collectively caused by our sleep. This book is a promise. We are awakening. You can rest now. We are coming home to you.
I'm like, I can't even listen to it without crying either.
It's
so beautiful, Michael.
Appreciate that. And in all honesty, every time I read it, it moves me too, because I wrote it, but I don't claim it. I was telling you both earlier before, like it woke me up in the middle of the night and I couldn't get it out of my head and my heart. So I went into my office and I started writing, and it happened the next night and the next night. And that's how the book came about. I had no intentions of writing a book. And my wife had asked me, what do you keep getting out of bed in the middle of the night for? Because I'm a really deep sleeper. And I read it to her, and my wife said, you need to write a book. And I wrote it off. I said, no, I don't have the time or the schedule to write a book. And then later that day, we were visiting my mother, and my wife had said, read what you wrote and what you read me to this morning to your mother. And I read it to my mother, and my mother said, you need to write a book. And then I said, well, if the two most important women in my life are telling me to write a book, I must need to write a book.
Talk about voices of goddesses being right in your ear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're in the house, Michael. They're in the house. I love how you said that the inspiration just came to you and you just had to get it out. And you hear this from writers all the time. Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic, she talks about how ideals are floating out there in the universe, and sometimes you get access to them right in moments of clarity, and you pluck those ideas and you put them out there, and just not because you think it's a good idea, but because you have to, right? Like, this is your experience, right? You had these ideas and you just had to get it out. And I know we talked a little bit earlier about formal training to be a writer and things like you are a writer. That's what that is. That's what that is. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. It's so funny because this kept happening night after night. So when I said, okay, I'll write a book, and when I made that commitment to my wife and to my mother, I thought, I'll just get inspired downloads, and that's how I'll write the book. And the moment I made the commitment, it all dried up. I had this idea of like, I'll have this like feminine inspiration and creativity. And then when it dried up, it was for me, it was actually, no, I made this commitment. I need to sit down every day at this time, undistracted, and whatever comes and get it out. And for the first few, I said I wanted to write a book of 50,000 words. And for the first 25,000, I was like, this is like a masculine grind.
Yes.
And then as soon as I was halfway, it all flipped. And then it just became this like creative force that I found was so much more feminine and fluid. And it just And I remember writing and surpassing 50,000 words almost effortlessly. So it's this combination, I think, for me of masculine structure and feminine inspiration, and that put the book together for me.
And we talk about, how this show is for everyone. It's Voices of the Goddess, but it is for all, about all, right? We are one all together. So the fact that every experience that we have has those masculine and feminine energies to it, and I know we're all waiting for like the easy flow, but yeah, the universe says sometimes you just got to do the work,
Yes, indeed.
I think that's how Hemingway wrote. He sat in his little loft and threw down the little. He had a hanging. What's that thing called? Like a rope bridge, basically, between his main house and his guest house, and then the guest house is where he wrote. And then he would throw it down so no one could visit him. So
yeah, well, I certainly wouldn't compare myself to Hemingway, and I pretty much and guarantee he used a little more whiskey than I did to write his books. Than mine.
But not as many tears, Michael. Not as many tears, I'm gonna guess. So you're uniquely positioned.
Perhaps. Thank you.
I have to say I think part of what like gets me so emotional about this, and we were talking about Egypt in our past episode, and Egypt, I went for the first time. It's now almost 5 years ago, and last year I went for the second time. But on that first trip, just visiting all the temples and connecting with Isis and Hathor and Sekhmet, and their message was continuously that for this healing to happen, like women need to step into their true sacred feminine so that it allows the divine sacred masculine to come through. And, because we as women had gotten into, yes, we're female by anatomy, but our ways of being had just gotten so, forceful, masculine, and everything that's beautiful about the sacred feminine had kind of been buried in us. And so I left going, okay, I know what we have to do, but it just seemed overwhelming. And then when I read that in the dedication in your book, I'm like, there are men that are going to step up too and help us make that switch and help us get back to, it's a space of love. And, so it was almost like a huge relief when I read that, like, okay, I don't have to do this alone. Like there are men that are going to do their part on their side, and we're all going to come together to make this happen. So
yeah, I think there's a level. Absolutely, it's my pleasure. I think there's a level of reciprocity where what has been suffocated and suppressed in us or in men, and suffocated and suppressed in women, is as men and women have the courage to tap into that. I think we're going to find that it's going to be reciprocal. That both sides will feel safe enough, or perhaps safe again, to have that level of reverence for each other, which I think is being lost or has been lost.
Yeah, it's all I've tapped into the spiritual world for many long years, and early on, it felt overwhelming that there was never going to get the 2% or whatever it is that we need, but moving forward in all that we're going through and going through the pandemic, even though things sometimes seem like they're getting worse, I can see that more people are awakening and that we're getting there. And I do hope that we make the shift in my lifetime, to be able to witness it, or at least make great strides in getting there. But I definitely see a difference now compared to, 30 years ago when I started the spiritual journey. So we're making progress, but I made the call that this is the book that Michael wants every goddess to read. But was there another book that you wanted to share, or?
Well, that works for me. I think that for me, yes, there is. We were talking about, or you both were talking about men crying, and earlier before I got on. There's not a lot of books that move me very emotionally. I think I tend to read books that are in that philosophy or psychology and that personal development and growth. One that really moved me was Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. That I remember my mother recommended it to me years ago. And it was her whole philosophy of calling it Broken Open was really about the rose a tightly wound rose. And in order for it to really blossom, it has to crack open some of those painful, dark spots. And she tells her personal story of really breaking open and using the difficult parts of her life to reconnect to her authenticity and to her spiritual self. And it's not very woo-woo-y and things, and it's very pragmatic and just very beautifully written. And I remember certain chapters closing them and being really moved emotionally. So that moved me for sure. I'm sure there's many of them, but one that stands out would be that, Broken Open.
That's
Love
awesome.
that.
I definitely wrote that one down with a quickness. I love the idea that having emotions and crying and things like that, like the idea that masculine is strong and feminine is weak, right? Like there's such a flaw in that. And so I'd love to push out that message that being feminine and having feminine emotions, quote unquote, is not a sign of weakness, right? Like you, in your dedication, you mentioned about a shield, right? And a friend of mine I think it's somewhere in the Buddhist philosophy about you don't have to be the sword, you can be the shield, you know? And there's a lot of different ways of being the warrior, right? And so I really love that. What a great recommendation. I can ask about the success story, Julietta? Yes?
You can.
I know she took over all my order of questions. So now I'm all, out of control. But we've talked so much about what you do and how you do it. Give me one of those really great success stories that keeps you inspired to keep on doing what you're doing. I mean, there's a difference between a vocation and an avocation, right? Like what keeps you going?
Oh, wow. I mean, there's so many success stories where I feel privileged to even be a small part of them. But I think one of the biggest, I maybe can say is the biggest because he continues to make such a influence and impact on my life personally, is I met a man almost got to be 6 years now. We were together on a mastermind where I was a coach and he was a participant. And one of the other gentlemen there is a lot more blunt than I am. This man that I'm talking about was really shut down, really guarded. Oh, there was a toxicity about, I think, his life, his marriage, not him, but one of the gentlemen that I was coaching with, who was more blunt than I was, said, hey, listen, if you're like this in a year, lose my number.
Wow.
When we left the mastermind, he came home and he called me and he said, I need help. And he lived in Pennsylvania and my wellness center at the time was in New Jersey. And he hired me for 3 years, and he would drive once a week and over an hour each way to sit with me for an hour and then drive back. And he radically shifted his life. And at the time, was in a marriage that wasn't working, never wanted children. And today he's happily married, has 2 little girls, and he's now made such a transformation. He's my main coach that I pass certain things off to, and he's on every call of my group called Find Your Tribe. He's now my main coach that I pass things off to.
That is
Wow.
amazing.
And it's so funny because when the men come into Find Your Tribe, the online program, they see this gentleman as like, wow, this guy's such a beacon of light and positivity. I'm like, yeah, you should have met him 6 years ago. And so, we laugh at it all the time. And he's a really inspiring story. And then now he's building his own coaching practice. It's been amazing to witness his transformation.
It speaks a lot to, just keep showing up, right? Just keep showing up, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you think it might not do the thing that you think it needs to do, right? But just having that seed of hope, that seed of, okay, I know that it's in here somewhere, right? That's incredibly powerful. I'm so excited for your business and all of your multimedia outlets. How exciting.
Thank you.
Awesome. So one other thing that we would like to know is, what is the best piece of advice that you've gotten from a woman, something that shifted your life?
Aside from your wife and mother telling you to write a book.
Okay, we've got that. I think for me, my mother is not someone who she speaks straight, don't get me wrong, sometimes too straight, but she would probably argue my point. But I think for my mother is more of, let me demonstrate it rather than say it. And I think my mother's life and what I've learned from her is to be brave and to be yourself truly and genuinely, authentically is going to require your bravery. And so I think for what my mom has demonstrated and shown me and advised me is to speak my truth and never forget that it's going to require bravery.
So
Yeah.
true. I think we might need to have this woman on the show. I mean, she's featured heavily in our talk today.
I think you should. She would do it kicking and screaming because she doesn't like to be the center of attention, but I think you should push her on it for sure.
Well, tell her it requires bravery.
Yes, yes, it does. It does. And my mother wrote a book too, as well, on her story and her upbringing. It's called Unheard Voices, and my mother has a fantastic story that I think a lot of women can pull a lot of value from, and she continues to today.
Absolutely amazing. How fortunate for you to be in that environment growing up. How wonderful.
Yeah.
So, with all your adventures and all your things and all the bravery and all the things that you've done, it requires a lot of risk and things like that. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So give me a really great moment in your life, something that you've done that you will never regret, for better or for worse, just something that's no regrets. Like, it happened and it's part of my life.
That I'll never regret?
Yes.
I will never regret asking my wife to marry me.
Oh, how beautiful. Oh, now you're just trying to charm us all, Mike.
No, of all the things, well, I'll say this. We're currently, my wife is pregnant with our first child. We were having a son in December.
Oh, congratulations.
And it's taken us a long journey to get here. We've been trying for 3 years, but I've been saying throughout this pregnancy, and he's not even born yet, but I say throughout this pregnancy, I'm like, there's nothing I'll ever create, produce, or bring to life that will ever top what my wife has gone through to make us a family. Like that miracle of, and I think for us, it's even beyond a miracle because it's been so long and so much effort just to get pregnant, where there's some people that just walk into a room and they get pregnant. That's not us. So I think innately that there's nothing I'll ever create that'll ever come to that level of bringing a child into the world. And I know no matter what, even what has led up to some of the challenges in my old relationships, and I would go through those 100 times over if it meant meeting my wife. So I know there's never a doubt in my mind that I will ever regret meeting my wife or asking her to marry me.
Beautiful. And I'm excited because hopefully this baby's going to be a Sagittarius.
We'll see. We find out soon when the actual date is going to be. So we'll see.
I'm rooting for Sagittarius.
That's hysterical. You know, what I love about having twins is, like, I had this little sociological, anthropological experiment at home, right? Like, boys, girls, what are they born with? What are they not born with? What's nature? What's nurture? You know? And when you do the work that you do, like, I'm sure all of that is in the back of your mind. Like, oh, when my son comes, I'm going to X, Y, Z, right? And as a mom, I'm just going to warn you, it's never what you think it's going to be. And it's always better than you think it's going to be.
I've gotten that advice, from a lot of people similar to yourself that really do the work. They say, it's what you think and what life has in store are not always the same thing. Yeah. And rarely are they. And I think, to make a valuable point for your audience, I should say, I've been reading a lot and learning and asking advice on parenthood and especially on fatherhood. And one of the things that is becoming a theme, at least in my perception, is I think the older generations, like my father, the mindset was to be a woodworker. Mm. I need to take this block of wood and I need to shape it into something. Like that was how my father raised me. Like, here's this thing and I need to make this kid or this son something. And the mindset now is more, don't be a woodworker, be a gardener. Yeah. And nurture the soil and weed it and protect it and give it love and food and nurture it and allow it to become what it's destined to become. And rather than force my son to become something, is really just to support him to be what he's destined to be. So that's like the mindset I'm coming into parenthood with.
I think that's a really great foundation. And I will tell you that it is really challenging because as a parent, you're always a protector, right? And like I always say about my kids, like you can be creative and you can be yourself, but you can't drive a car backwards down the street because you think it's a great idea, right? Like, so there are still cultural and societal norms that we have to follow, right? You have to earn money somehow. You have to feed yourself somehow, right? Like these basic things have to happen. But yes, that concept of letting them be themselves, and sometimes it's really hard, like especially me that I love controlling things, and I'm like, okay, we're going to do cupcakes today. And then my kids want to like my son is one of those out of the box thinkers. Like instead of putting the frosting on top of the cupcake, he'd rather take the cupcake, dip it upside down, rub it on the frosting and be like, done, gotta go, like that kind of guy. But it's a lot of fun. It's exciting. It's challenging. It's loving. It's, they're always the best when they're sleeping. I will tell you that much is true also.
Well, here it goes. I'll report back soon.
And just having that community, makes such a big difference. So much of my parenting really has been having my village with me. I will say that if you will allow me to impart just a little bit of my own experience, our homes are physically built with brick walls. When you go to even to give birth, you're alone, right? Like there's a lot of alone time in this parenting. And I would say, go the other way, fill your house, let people help you, all the things that you think, oh no, I can handle it. There's no reason to, like there's so much wisdom. We talk about here, ancestral wisdom, like these things have been passed down for generations. Let that come to you. Let that help you and buoy you throughout all of this. I'm so excited. Invite me. I'm coming.
It takes a village.
Indeed.
So we've talked a lot of like deep stuff, philosophy stuff here, but the last thing we want to know is, what is your most sweetest, delicious memory?
Oh my goodness, my life is peppered with delicious memories. I mean, I would have to say there's a lot of adventures I've been on with my wife, but I would say there's a moment in our honeymoon. We decided to go to Vietnam for our honeymoon, and it was we were in this national park in Vietnam, and we stayed in this beautiful villa where you would let them know we're going out adventuring. When we come back, please just cook us a traditional Vietnamese meal. And we were on a scooter, and for some reason we got the entire park to ourselves. And my wife is on the back of the scooter. I'm driving it through this gorgeous national park in Vietnam. And she said, I don't know if I've ever seen you smile that big. And I remember jokingly, she thinks I was being serious, jokingly getting off the scooter and saying, this is the greatest day of my life. And she said, well, you're supposed to tell me that getting married, the day of our wedding was the greatest day of your life, which just happened, by the way. But we still joke to this day about the greatest day of my life was a scooter in Vietnam. But I would say that moment being so remote with my wife, disconnected. This was actually at the beginning of the pandemic as well. So we just had no idea what was going on in the world. And it was just my wife and I just adventuring around, doing what we do, having a blast together, and then coming home and feasting together. And I would say that day overall, minus my wedding day, was probably the juiciest moment.
Beautiful story. And again, I keep saying, like, being out in Mother Nature, just whatever it is, it just expands the energy of any moment. To try and, yes, there were wonderful moments that happen indoors, but it just seems when you're outdoors and, Mother Earth is there, like it just lifts everything to a new level.
I'm in total agreement. I would say that if I were to download all of my, like you call delicious moments in life, I would say that 95% of them had nature involved or feasting together involved.
Absolutely. Food, sunshine, and a good breeze cannot be beat.
No, it cannot. I think they're the two biggest medicines.
Absolutely.
Michael, you've been absolutely gorgeous. Oh. And I don't mean that. I mean, physically, podcast people, he's not bad looking, but I'm just saying, I've enjoyed our time together so much. I'm so excited to share this episode with everyone.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure and a blessing, and I'm humbled to be here. So thank you.
And just shameless plug here. Again, the book is obviously by the title directed towards men. I loved reading the book. Your way of writing is very easy to read and just beautiful. And this is something to like healing and growth. It's all really simple. It's not that complicated, but you just need a reminder of what those things are, and you do lay it out just beautifully and easy to understand. So I recommend you read it. And ladies, like, read it. I was telling Graciela, read it and leave it out on the coffee table, and hopefully your man will pick it up and read it too.
Yeah, I was saying in my house, it might require like a private one-on-one reading. I leave books all over my house. Nobody else picks them up. But, sharing it intentionally makes a big difference. Julietta, this has book club written all over it.
We talk about bringing it back. So let's see what's possible. So, but thank you, Michael, for joining us. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show, and so many golden nuggets here. I hope lots of people listen in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, dear ones, for joining us today. Make sure you check out the show notes for details on how to get in touch with either Julietta, Graciela, or today's special guest. Don't forget to subscribe, review, like, and share.
Big love and gratitude for all of you. May the path before you be ever illuminated by your fellow goddesses. Shine bright and have a magical day.